international affairs. President Joe Biden meets with world leaders, including the controversial new president of the Philippines. Commitment to America. Get a preview of the plan House Republicans will unveil tomorrow. Aid for Ukraine. How a group started by people of faith is trying to meet the needs of refugees. And cancel culture. Why TikTok is targeting Catholic vote. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sabol. President Joe Biden says the U.S. relationship with the Philippines has deep roots and strong ties despite some rocky times. Well, today he met with the new president of the predominantly Catholic country, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, for President Joe Biden, the meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York City offered him his first chance for face-to-face engagement with the leader of a key U.S. ally in the Pacific.
President Joe Biden and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., son of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos, exchanged kind words before reporters.
We have strong ties, including millions of Filipino Americans who are very proud of their ancestry and desperately want us to continue to have a strong relationship.
President Biden said the two would discuss COVID-19, renewable energies, human rights, the South China Sea, and Ukraine.
Thank you for your position on the war against Ukraine and by Russia and how it's impacting energy prices and food prices.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken emphasizes the U.S. will continue to support Ukraine as it defends itself.
One man chose this war. One man can end it. Because if Russia stops fighting, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends.
Secretary Blinken also said Russia is attacking dams, bridges, power stations, and hospitals, and he told one story of torture.
Survivors' accounts are also emerging, including a man who described being tortured by Russian forces for 12 days, during which his interrogators repeatedly electrocuted him and, in his words, and I quote, beat me to the point where I didn't feel anything.
Also today, President Biden said the full force of the federal government is ready to help Puerto Rico devastated by Hurricane Fiona. Many people there remain without power and without water, and it's unclear right now, as of this moment, when service will be fully restored. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, tomorrow, House Republicans plan to roll out their commitment to America. They say it will serve as both a campaign platform and a governing guide should they take the majority in the midterms. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales plans to attend the event near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but joins us now from Capitol Hill with more.
Good evening to you, Tracy. About 30 GOP House members plan to attend the event in Pennsylvania, and we at EWTN News Nightly will be there as well. House GOP leadership remains very tight-lipped on the exact priorities that will be revealed, but it will likely focus on several main issues, such as securing the border, the out-of-control spending taking place up here on Capitol Hill, and the inflation crisis, along with other kitchen table issues. Now, this strategy is similar to what Republicans rolled out during the 1994 elections, which helped them seize control of the House. Last year, I spoke one-on-one with leader Kevin McCarthy in his office about the threats facing the U.S. right now, from the attacks on religious liberty to foreign adversaries, and what needs to change.
Our freedom's being taken away. Not just our freedom of speech, we see by these big tech companies, the censorship, if they don't agree with what you say. And then we found during COVID, when we were talking about, no, you couldn't put it up, but now we're right that it happened at Wuhan, they have to come back. And then we're finding that government's greater control trying to tell us what we can do, where we can go, what we can think. And now what we're finding in our schools with this critical race theory. I mean, We celebrate our freedoms, but we're going to have to fight for our freedoms, defend our freedoms.
The GOP is riding a wave right now. Advantages like the economy and President Biden's low approval ratings. However, Democrats feel that they do have the momentum after Roe v. Wade was overturned and the legal troubles of former President Donald Trump. Tomorrow, I will bring you the very latest from Pennsylvania on the House GOP's commitment to America. Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
In western Mexico today, a powerful earthquake killed at least 2 people. The 6.8 aftershock also triggered destructive landslides. It struck near Monday's magnitude 7.6 quake that also killed 2 and damaged 8 Catholic churches. Well, at least one group in Australia objects to the National Day of Mourning for Queen Elizabeth II. Indigenous protesters did not want the Aboriginal flag flying at half-mast today, saying that Native people want to end constitutional monarchy. Meanwhile, Australian lawmakers held a formal ceremony in Parliament's Great Hall to honor the late Queen. Russian and Ukrainian forces exchanged artillery fire today, only hours after swapping prisoners. A Russian missile killed 1 and wounded 5 in a southern Ukrainian city. Separately, a Ukrainian shell struck a contested border city, killing at least 6 people. Neither side is yielding, despite recent military setbacks for Moscow. Well, speaking at the conclusion of his weekly talk, Pope Francis asked everyone to be close in their thoughts and prayers to the noble and martyred people of Ukraine. To show his closeness to the country, last week, the Pope sent to Ukraine for the 4th time Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, head of the Office for the Service of Charity. While in the Zaporizhia region, the cardinal was shot at while delivering humanitarian aid. Despite the situation, the cardinal continued his mission. Joining us now from Ukraine is Tatiana Stavnichi, president of Caritas Ukraine. Tatiana, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us about the current situation after 7 months of war, and also how is Caritas operating in the territory?
Yes, so we have really been layering our programs to respond to the needs in different regions. You might remember we have a very strong network because we use the parish network in Ukraine as part of our humanitarian response. So we have a network throughout the country. There is right now probably the most intensive preparation is going for preparation for winter. So different kinds of efforts that will make sure that people have both shelter and warmth for winter. We're, of course, continuing the regular humanitarian aid and the stabilization. And at the same time, we're working on this winterization approach, where we are both increasing the number of shelters that we have. So we're anticipating additional numbers of displaced people coming through our shelters. So we've increased those from 129 to 181 shelters throughout the country. We also are working on fixing light repairs of houses that have been damaged due to the shelling in areas that have been liberated, that are deoccupied. And we're working on, it's mostly in areas north of Kyiv, but also around in the Mykolaiv, Odessa region as well.
Yeah, another thing I want to touch on, as you know, the Pope recently sent Cardinal Krajewski to Ukraine, and as we reported, he was shot at while handing out aid there. That said, Tatiana, can you talk to us about a little bit more about what it's like in certain territories and how dangerous it still is?
So it's obviously very dangerous in areas that are close to the front line. Because those are easy access. They can be accessed by weapons and shelling from across the contact line, from across the front line. There's a general danger throughout the whole country with missile strikes that continues. Although recently they've been a little bit more focused in the eastern part of the country, but that danger exists throughout the region. So of course it is dangerous. There's danger everywhere. There's regular air raid sirens going off, and you need to analyze your risks and take shelter when it's needed.
And Tatiana, before I let you go, what else would you like people to know about what's happening in Ukraine right now and the particular needs of the Ukrainian people?
I think it's important for people to know that the needs and the number of people who are in need has not lessened, but it has grown. The UN has upped the numbers of their estimate of people in need in Ukraine to 7.7 million. That's not quite half the population. So the needs are still great. There's still a lot of work to be done through the winter period, especially, and it's also important, I think, for people in Ukraine to know that there's solidarity, that there's still prayers coming our way, and that there's a solidarity in spirit with us.
Well, Tatiana, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you for what you do. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Coming up, how the rules for certifying presidential elections might change. An Indiana judge has blocked enforcement of the state's new abortion ban as a lawsuit proceeds. The law generally prohibits an abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy with restrictions after 13. The state's attorney general plans to appeal. Well, the House of Representatives has passed legislation to overhaul the rules for certifying a presidential election. The measure was approved last night. The Electoral Count Act governs how states and Congress certifies electors and declares presidential election winners. House Democrats support the measure. Most Republicans say the law should not be a priority and also question the timing of the vote. And we go now to Dennis Ross, the director of the American Center for Political Leadership and Southeastern University. He is also a former member of Congress. Representative Ross, thanks so much for your time today. We appreciate it. So can you tell us what exactly these proposed changes will do? And do you think this is a move in the right direction? Your thoughts?
Well, I think we need to address the Electoral Count Act because of what happened on January 6th. But what was passed yesterday is more of a nationalization of our electoral process, which was not intended by our Constitution, which in Article 1 requires that each state determine the method and manner by which they choose their electors to elect a president. But what was passed yesterday was significant for a couple of reasons. One, it changed the threshold from just one member of each chamber to object to any particular state's votes to 1/5 of each chamber to object. And that's a pretty significant threshold. The other thing it does is that it changes the method and manner by which you can challenge this in court, and it makes the federal courts have the control so that they can determine whether the ballots ought to be counted or not. It does identify that the vice president is in a ministerial role and not an authoritative role to discount or otherwise reject electoral ballots. The timing is a little interesting because we're getting ready for midterms. There's a good chance that the Republicans will win the House over in this next election, so you'll see this again in the midterms. But I will tell you the Senate also has a similar bill. It's supported by 10 Republicans, which means that they've got 60 votes over there to send it over. I believe that you'll see something banter back from the Senate, and it might be more like the Senate's version, which only requires 1/3 of each chamber to object and has a predetermined path, including state courts or the state judicial process to be able to overturn any of the ballots or the choosing of the electors.
Yeah, very interesting. We'll see how that all shakes out. Switching gears, a court ruling yesterday cleared the way for the investigation to continue into the documents seized during the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago last month. How big a setback is this for President Donald Trump?
Well, you got to understand that President Trump has taken the position that he can declassify, that the president can declassify at any time. And I'm not so sure that's the case. And so that's being put to a test here. This is as much a political battle as it is a legal struggle for what the powers of the president actually are. And the president does have certain enumerated rights to declassify information, but there's a process to do that. This is probably a little bit of a setback for the former president as he challenges what was done as a very unusual search and seizure of materials from his home. So I would say that yes, it's a bit of a setback for the president, but you got to understand the president has taken a very strong position that he can declassify at any time, which I don't think will be determined to be the state of the law at the end of the day.
We have probably a little less than a minute left, but I want to get your opinion on something else about the migrants being flown from Florida to places like Martha's Vineyard. As you know, Governor Ron DeSantis received a lot of attention for this and mixed reaction. Your thoughts?
Well, it's not the first time in American history that we used a class of people for political purposes. But also, I will tell you that we've got to raise the awareness and do something about our immigration system. And there are very good people, I'm sure, that are coming across our borders that need our help, and we can provide them that particular future that they need in order to not only be prosperous themselves, but also to make this country a very stronger country. But I will tell you that if we don't get a consensus, if we don't get an agenda item between the House and the Senate to address the porous nature of our borders, this is only going to get worse. What we saw happen with Governor DeSantis sending the planes to Martha's Vineyard and Governor Abbott going to Chicago is only going to get worse. This has to be brought to some sense of a resolution, and the parties have got to do this. And the only way we can do that is to get Congress to address it, because it is their responsibility. It is Congress's responsibility to secure our borders and to make sure we have a good immigration system that is what exactly made this country. So I'm hopeful that it doesn't escalate anymore, but I'm concerned that it will, and it's going to probably get worse before it gets better.
Representative Ross, always great to have you on. Thank you so much for weighing in.
You bet. Thank you.
A Catholic organization which aims to bring the faith to the forefront in American daily life has been temporarily suspended from social media giant TikTok. The move came after Catholic Vote posted videos calling attention to same-sex themed children's books with content it deemed as too graphic. TikTok called the group's videos, quote, hateful behavior. Initially, Catholic Vote was permanently banned. Its account has since been termed, quote, temporarily suspended. And we go now to Brian Birch, president of Catholic Vote. Brian, thanks so much for joining us today. So tell us a little bit more about what happened, the videos you posted, and we understand that there is an update on the status of this account. Tell us more about this.
Yes, thank you for having me. You are correct. Just this week, we were notified by TikTok that we had been banned from the platform. The only notice that we were given was several months ago in response to several videos that we had posted, including one where we were merely reading from a book found in public libraries aimed at children, talking about people's gender identity and gender transitioning. And then another video that we showed, which was a video of a drag queen event of a male dressed as a woman along with children there. And we, of course, expressed our opposition to these kinds of events occurring. TikTok deemed those videos hateful in potentially inciting violence and removed us from the platform. And I think the conclusion here is pretty obvious. Catholic views on human sexuality are increasingly coming under attack by big tech. And it sure seems that if you hold to a traditional moral understanding of male and female, of science, of biology, that big tech is willing now to remove you from the public conversation.
Brian, were you surprised this happened?
You know, we're not the first ones to be censored. This has been ongoing. The former president was banned, of course, from Twitter, and there are various debates occurring about whether that is legitimate and whether private companies have the right to do so. You know, it's interesting because I think we've moved from the perception of speech that may lead to violence or to illegal activity to now just perfectly legitimate speech that's deemed socially disfavored. You know, it is not illegal in this country to talk about what's happening in the so-called gender revolution underway. And it seems to me that we are being slowly kind of ratcheted down where perfectly legal speech is now being prohibited on a lot of these platforms run by some of the largest companies in the world.
Brian, before I let you go, I have a whole lot of time left, but I know the Catholic Vote is also doing a novena for churches and pro-life pregnancy centers, and it began a couple of days ago. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, that's correct. We just started 2 days ago a nine-day novena to St. Michael the Archangel, specifically asking for his intercession to protect pregnancy resource centers and churches that have been the target of ongoing violence over the last several years, and in particular since the release of the Roe v. Wade decision. These attacks are not just political and criminal acts. They are a part of a spiritual war that I think we all sense is going on. And so we have to meet that with political weapons as well as the spiritual weapons. And there's no better advocate than St. Michael the Archangel, whose feast day we celebrate next week.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Up next, how pro-life supporters are working to win the day in a battleground state. Plus, remembering the Holy Father's first apostolic visit to North America. As we reported earlier this week, Pennsylvania became the first state to hold a March for Life since Roe versus Wade was overturned. And one reporter who attended the rally says the pro-lifers were excited but also realistic about the continued fight for the unborn. And that reporter joins us now. Mary Margaret Olahan is the senior reporter for the Daily Signal. Mary Margaret, great to be with you as always. So how was the event and what was the atmosphere like? Was it any different from those you attended in the past before Roe was overturned?
Yes, so this was a really interesting event to go see. There were about 5,000 people gathered in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania's state capital, on a Monday morning. It was kind of hot. There were a ton of families, lots of kids, lots of children with different types of special needs. Just a really beautiful morning out seeing all these people gathered together to March for Life. And of course, we know this is the very first March for Life since Roe v. Wade was overturned. So that had a special significance that it added to this pro-life protest. And all these people that we spoke with told us that they were there to show the world and to show Pennsylvania legislators that the fight for abortion is not over. And now that it is up to the states to decide abortion laws, these protesters now more than ever want to make their voices heard.
And talk to us about the role that abortion is playing in Pennsylvania in the upcoming midterms. I know that you caught up with one of the candidates running for governor. What did he have to say about the attacks on pro-life pregnancy centers?
Yes, so we were fortunate enough to catch Doug Mastriano, who is running for the governor's seat in Pennsylvania. We talked to him a little bit about Democratic abortion extremism. You know, a lot of these Democrats that are running for office right now, they don't want any abortion restrictions whatsoever. And when you ask them about it, they can't name a single one that they support, which is wild and out of touch with Americans, since most Americans support abortion restrictions, particularly to protect the baby after the baby can feel pain. And so we asked Doug Mastriano what he thinks of all this. He told us that he is horrified by all these attacks on crisis pregnancy centers and that he's calling on Democrats to cease their rhetoric that is amplifying these types of attacks. And honestly, some of these Democratic politicians like Senator Warren and Senator Mazie Hirono, and today Vice President Kamala Harris just talked about how she's happy that Democrats are taking on the crisis pregnancy centers. This type of rhetoric is not doing anything to tamp down the attacks on the crisis pregnancy centers. And we haven't seen a lot of action from the Department of Justice on this either. So it was good to catch up with Doug Mastriano about these topics. It was also good to kind of get the feeling from different protesters, these pro-life activists that showed up at Harrisburg State Capitol, and kind of ask them, do you support these extreme measures that these Democratic candidates are putting forward? And obviously, most of them said, no, I didn't find a single person that supported such measures.
Well, Mary Margaret, we have to leave it right there. Always great to check in with you. And thanks again for always coming on.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, on this day back in 2015, Pope Francis arrived in the U.S. during his first apostolic visit to North America. President Barack Obama greeted the Holy Father upon arrival from Cuba. Special moments included canonizing St. Junipero Serra during Mass at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception and a first ever papal speech to a joint session of Congress when Pope Francis invited lawmakers to work together for the common good. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.